Jamie back with another episode of Gold Rushes of Australia. Well, it's been quite a ride telling the story of Harold Lasseter and his lost reef, allegedly somewhere out in the middle of outback Australia. Now, Lasseter was obviously a pretty convincing guy to get a very expensive expedition up in 1930 and led by Fred Blakely, and all they had to go on was his stories of first finding the gold when he was still a teenager in 1897, and then again in 1900 with a mysterious fella named Harding. Last week I left the story with the expedition leader Fred Blakely abandoning the search just due to the harsh terrain. They could barely push their six-wheeled truck through the sand, let alone drive it. They abandoned the search and returned to Alice Springs via Il Bilba, where Lasseter remained with a young German man named Paul Johns, who had a team of camels. And it was Johns and his camels were hired for a period of 2 months to take Lasseter back out into the desert to search for that reef. The only outside account of Lasseter's last search came from Paul Johns in an interview he did a couple of years later in 1932. Interestingly, this interview wasn't published until 1968, and then it was only a small booklet with around 100 copies printed. On the 3rd of September 1930, Lasseter and Johns set out with the camels, carrying around 3 months' worth of supplies, heading for a place called Patati, and when they got there they ended up offloading half their supplies so that they could travel lighter. The going was tough and they made it to Lake Amadeus and crossed the large salt pan. But the camels broke through the salt crust and ended up bogged in this quicksand-like mud. Well, it took them days to get them out, and by the time they made it to the other side, heading towards Mount Olga, they were again running out of food and water. When they made it to the Peterman Ranges, they did find a few glimpses of gold, a few bits of colour, but nothing of any significance. They continued on deep into Western Australian territory before again having to turn back towards Il Bilba, which took about 10 days to return to. Johns decided to head back to Alice Springs for fresh supplies, leaving Lasseter alone at the camp. Before he left, Harold gave him a letter to the Central Australian Gold Exploration Company outlining his plan to head out alone south for around 100 kilometres to a watering hole before moving on to Lake Christopher. He wanted Johns to catch up to him with the fresh supplies. Now, John said he tried to talk Lasseter out of going out alone, which would be the smart move, but Lasseter was insistent. This is the last time that any European saw Lasseter alive. Now, through one mishap or another, it took over 2 months for the exploration company to get up a search for Lasseter. On the 25th of April 1931, so months later, Lasseter's body was finally found at a place called Shaw's Creek, around 80 kilometres west of Mount Olga. Now, the local Aboriginal people confirmed that he had died of starvation. Now, Lasseter did leave behind a diary where he claims that he found the reef and pegged it out, even marking it on a map. But despite countless searches and even a few claims to have found it, there's never been any evidence of the discovery of the Lasseter Reef. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Harold Lasseter and his mysterious reef. I'll start on something new next week on Gold Rushes of Australia, right here on the Miners Den Show.